Hello and welcome back to a brand new episode of Only a Bag, your guide to Italian travel. I'm Nathaniel Mellor.
And I'm Darcy Melton.
Thank you all so much for joining us, and if this is your first episode, welcome. We appreciate having you here. We hope you will enjoy your stay and continue to come back. In this episode, we're going to be talking about cruise ships in Italy, not necessarily the controversy surrounding them, which is specifically the controversy of cruise ships in Venice. This is more about whether or not you should take a cruise ship, if it's a good idea to take a cruise ship, if there's anything you're missing, and I guess just the extent of them, the port of call, the port of departure, what they might contain in terms of an Italian experience. And does that sound about right?
Yeah, I'm just listening to your nautical terms.
My nautical term. I know. I saw port of call and port of departure, and I was like, I gotta weave them in somehow, which seems really easy given the fact it's a podcast episode on cruise ships. And if you'd like to follow us, you can do so at Instagram at onlyabagpodcast. You can also send us an email, onlybagpodcast@gmail.com. We're happy to respond to any questions, comments, concerns. If you're going on a trip or planning a trip and you need some help, send us a message. We're happy to help, happy to respond. And if you'd like to check out some articles, if you prefer just bookmarking articles on your phone or computer, you can do so onlyabag.com. We also have like a little, I don't know, messaging thing on there.
It's like a contact box.
Contact box. That's what it's called. Thank you. On take 1 and 2, I could not remember the name of it. Contact box.
And this is take 5?
Easily.
We got it. We got it.
Yes. I'm getting like really rehearsed at this point.
And thank you to everybody who have been leaving us reviews and comments and who have been reaching out through email. It makes us very happy to talk with you through the internet and email.
It really does. Thank you. It also is happy to know that people are listening because I mean, I know that like, it says like, oh, you have listens. I'm like, that's awesome. But it's nice that when people, I don't know, interact with it and have questions about it, it's like kind of fun.
It's nice to know you're real.
It's nice to know you're real. It's not just the metabot listening for us.
All the little internet bots listening to the podcast.
Exactly.
Thank you to you as well, bots.
Thank you to you. It's time out of your day, and we appreciate that. So, Darcy, take us on a journey.
Okay. A nautical journey,
if you will.
So we're doing this episode because my mom and my aunt are coming to visit at some point in the near future, and they're planning their trip now, and I'm very excited. And they looked into taking what I would consider, or at first considered a cruise, but really it's a ferry, from Barcelona to essentially Rome as part of their trip because they're coming not just to Italy, but to a couple different countries in Europe. And I had never really considered cruises or ferries or any sort of boat as a means of transportation in and around Italy. So I thought we should talk about it.
Despite the 5,000 miles of coastline that Italy has, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We got lots of coast.
Yeah. And we've never taken boats. I mean, in terms of, we've never taken boats as a main part of transportation unless going to an island. In the sense, I think you can take one from like Salerno to Naples, but it's longer than the train and just longer than the train, I guess, and doesn't go as central an area. Yeah, not as comfortable, doesn't go to as central an area. So we've never taken it as like a main form of transportation. That being said, we have taken them before. And I think we've also had, what would you say, sort of like tertiary experience with cruise ships or cruise lines in terms of like how other people perceive them and other people's experiences around them.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think it does. And I think basically a combination of all this is what led us to thinking, you know what? Today's the day. It's gloomy. It's snow on the mountains. Our heater's on. We're freezing. Let's talk about cruises. None of those go together, but in my head they do. It's sort of like, let's talk about something summery.
Yeah, we're warm in our minds. We're on the coast.
Yes. So
not in the snowy mountains.
Where would you like to start?
I kind of want to talk about the one that my mom was considering taking.
Absolutely.
Because I really didn't know that these existed. So she and my aunt were looking at taking a ferry from Barcelona to Rome, is how it was described. So it, to be clear, doesn't actually go to Rome. That was my first thing that I was talking to her about. It goes to Civita. Okay. The first Italian word I say wrong. Civitavecchia.
It's this idea that people are listening to you and they're going to be judging your Italian.
Oh, man. It's so ingrained in my brain. Okay. So it goes from Barcelona to Civitavecchia, which is not Rome. It is another city. And you then, once you arrive to Civitavecchia, you would take a bus into Rome. And So the other thing that I thought was really interesting when she told me about it, I first thought, oh no, you're going to be sitting in a seat in a crowded
Yeah,
room
for sure.
for
For sure.
hours. And the journey, I think, is about 20 hours. And I was surprised to know that she was actually going to be booking a room and not even an inside room, which I think was an option, but a room with a little porthole, a little window. So that was interesting that for, 20 hours you could have your own little bunk, essentially. I mean, it was a private room. I think it was her and my aunt. So your own private room with a small window and access to a bar. It seemed like not, there are different versions of this, but it seemed like a fairly normal average bar. There was a meal, I believe, included, and that's pretty much it. So,
It's interesting.
yeah,
The meal, especially, because I think a lot of those are just, you better come with food because you're not getting it on this trip.
right, that's what I thought it was going to be because I've taken it wasn't the Staten Island ferry, but I took some ferry in where is this place?
New
New
York?
York.
Oh, I was
That's
gonna say.
the one.
Down the street in Italy.
I took some ferry in New York, and then you and I took a ferry in Italy
Wait,
from.
you took a ferry in New York, but it wasn't the Staten Island ferry.
Yeah, it was a different ferry.
Where'd it go?
I don't remember.
Oh, I didn't know if it was like the Roosevelt Island ferry or like you went to Connecticut or something.
I don't know where I went.
I was on a boat for a short amount
I
of
just
time.
know I was on a ferry going somewhere. Probably
Okay,
because I
fair
thought it was
enough.
fun and quirky to take a ferry instead of the subway.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it was kind of miserable, but it wasn't very long. It was like an
In New
hour.
York. Okay. Just clarifying. Okay. So we have taken one here as well, as you mentioned.
Yes. So we took one from Naples
Yes.
to Capri.
To Capri.
Okay.
Not what I expected it to be either.
What was it? I don't really remember.
I have, and I guess if I may kind of jump in really briefly, and then I'm going to circle back to this, is in Italy, I think the Mediterranean as a whole, taking a ferry is not a outside the box idea in terms of like, it's quite common. It seems like it's quite popular. I took ferries when I was in Tunisia. There's a lot of ferries from Tunisia to Italy, to Croatia, to Greece, to Turkey, to Spain, France, Morocco, Egypt, Portugal. And I mean, you could even, it's really interesting because I think even Salerno, which is not down the street from us, an hour away, is a fairly large port. And they have, I think it's daily ferries to Tunisia. They have daily ferries to Greece.
Tunisia?
Yeah, Croatia.
Interesting.
And it's fascinating because it's quite a linked area in terms of, I guess in terms of the trains are not linked within Europe. You can't really take a train from Rome to Barcelona. In terms of you will have to, like going through France, you will probably have to switch onto a French train and then onto a Spanish train. I know that's changing slightly. I'm saying this now in January of 2025. I do know that the TGV in France is trying to create like a line that goes deep into Spain. Spain's trying to create a line that goes deep into France. Italy's trying to get to, Paris on the Trenitalia. So they're trying to create a sense where because it used to be, I mean, like if you hear people talk about like traveling through Europe in the 90s, it was like you get on a train in Amsterdam, you fall asleep, and you wake up in Naples. Mm-hmm. It's the same train.
Were there more privatized train companies?
And
Do you know?
I don't know if it was more privatized. I don't know if it was more of like kind of like the Orient Express type thing where it was like, oh yeah, you the only way you're crossing the border is when somebody stamps your passport. But if it's within the same area, it's not. I don't know if it's also at some point in the 90s there was a rise of not nationalism as it pertains to a railroad system, but more of like if every country was like, no, we want a solid rail system within our own country. We don't really care too much about going to other countries. So it's quite difficult because, I mean, again, with the TGV is a good example. The high-speed rail for France, you can get it in Genoa, but it doesn't go to like, Rome. It goes to Nice or whatever. And it's the same thing, I guess, in the States. I know most countries, I think all countries, but I'm going to say most. I know America for sure and Canada for sure. A foreign airline cannot operate domestic flights in the United States. So like when we fly to Savannah from New York, even though we took Lufthansa to New York, it has to be a domestic carrier, so I'm wondering if it's something like that, like in the sense of like, yeah, once you get into the country, you have to switch. Which is all to say, it's fascinating to me that ferries are still quite interlinked in terms of you can take a ferry from Italy to Tunisia and then, the next day take one up to Greece and the next day take one to so-and-so. And, you have to pass through passport control and things like that. But it's still a very valid form of transportation. And it's not necessarily what you and I would consider, I think, a cruise.
Right.
Just in terms of definition, if that helps.
Yeah.
Like
It is a boat that takes you from one place to another, and evidently you can sleep and eat on them. And there is a bar of some sort, which is more than I thought it would be. So it is not a cruise, but it is a semi-comfortable transit on the water.
It is. And I think the second thing I wanted to mention, just as, again, for those of you listening who kind of maybe want like a little bit of a little information just in terms of Darcy mentioned Civitavecchia, which is not Rome. I think most of the places you're going to want to visit in Italy are not actually on the water. Even Rome, which you'd think is on the water, because it's, I mean, on the map, it looks like it's on the water. And if you look
there's a river.
And there's a river, and used to have a port. Ostia was the port. I mean, it still is kind of a port, but not really a port anymore. In the sense that like it's not like major ships come through there. But Civitavecchia is about 45 minutes away, I think, and that is both for.
Is it that close?
I think so.
Okay.
It's under an hour because I know it's 120 euros in the cab, something like that, and it's like a standard rate. Like they have a standard rate for the two airports, and then Civitavecchia if you're going to or from a cruise line. But no, it's like we've seen, and we'll get into this in a minute, but we've seen a lot of cruises that offer like Lake Como or Milan or Florence or Pisa or wherever. And it's a lot of these places are fundamentally not on the water.
They are landlocked.
They are very much landlocked. So it was fascinating to us, like the idea that people were like, oh no, I'm taking a cruise and we're going to Florence. And I'm like, that's not possible, I don't think. That's kind of like we're going to St. Paul and we're going on a cruise. But like, I guess maybe actually St. Paul is I was thinking Minnesota, and that is on a river. So maybe there's a cruise there. I just went for a random landlocked city and I'm going to land on one that's the famous river cruise. That didn't work. But circling back, you talked about the ferry we took to Capri.
Mm-hmm.
That one there's two ferries, a fast ferry and a slow ferry. I had more experience with the slow ferry, which is the ones you can go out on deck. It's just a bunch of chairs. It's not like nice chairs. It's kind of like what you might find at a baseball stadium in terms of like the plastic hard chairs that you can spray down easily if they get dirty. This one was inside only because it's a fast one. You could not be on deck, which is a little weird because it kind of just felt like, I don't know, not even an air. You just were in a room, and then an hour later you're in Capri.
You were in a fast-moving room on the water.
Yeah.
With a bunch of other people in an uncomfortable chair.
Yeah.
And you couldn't go outside.
It was really strange. I mean, I think the chairs were assigned. I'm not entirely sure. I can't remember if the chairs were assigned or if they were free chairs. I know some are assigned and some where you just grab a chair wherever you want. Mm-hmm. But it's also, as you mentioned, your mom or was going to book a cabin. Mm-hmm. A lot of the times people don't. I know a lot of backpackers too don't. They just book a chair and then they'll wander around at night trying to find like where they can sleep either on the floor or on a chair or on a couple of chairs, or try to pull an all-nighter and sleep when they get in. But it's not. And we'll get into this in a minute, but it's not that much more expensive in terms of if you have money, if you're coming on a trip, if it's not like a shoestring budget type of thing. It's not wildly expensive to book a cabin if that's something you're interested in.
Right, it really wasn't. I was really kind of concerned immediately when my mom told me that they were thinking about that, because I was imagining the worst possible situation where there is absolutely no food, no sort of coffee, no bar. You get, you sit in a seat for 20 hours or something, and it was expensive in my mind. So it was about the same price for her to book a private cabin with a little window as it is to fly a decent flight, not Wizz Air or Ryanair. I think it was, I don't know, some national.
Alitalia, I think.
Yeah, I think it was Alitalia.
Or whatever it is now called Air Italy or Italy Air or something.
Yeah, something like that.
One of those is out of business.
But a decent flight, not a cheapo sort of horrible situation flight from Barcelona to Rome was the same price as the cabin with a view, somewhat view, for the ferry. So remarkably to me, if she had more time, is what I told her. If you have more time and you want to take a quirky, fun, alternate way of traveling, absolutely go for the ferry. It seems weird and not altogether uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. However, she's slightly limited on time, so I think for her, taking a flight made more sense. But it did open my eyes to this alternate way of traveling.
Well, especially because, as we say on our website, it's the ethical, sustainable way to travel. Or Only a Bag is about the ethical, sustainable travel method, and that would be a boat in this case rather than a flight, because it's always a little strange when you take such a short flight. I think the Barcelona to Rome flight can only be like an hour and a half, maybe. Because I know I flew from Naples and like you hit Spain in an hour, so I don't know how long it takes to slow down and circle and land. But it's also difficult because, as we've just, part of the reason I wanted to mention the trains is it's somewhere in the range of 300 to 400 euros to take a train from Rome to Barcelona. It takes about 20 hours, give or take, just in the fact that you're changing trains. There is some wait time involved, the not layover, but I don't know, I guess layover for trains, if that's the same word. There are only a few companies that are private companies that offer, we've talked about before, overnight trains in Italy. Those typically only go from Italian city to Italian city. There's not any that go from Italy to another country that I'm aware of. I think there's one company called Nightjar. I want to say they started with like a Prague to Berlin run, and they're starting or will start going to Venice, I think, but only from like Bruges or something like that, somewhere in Belgium. So there's not a lot of options in terms of climate friendly sort of way to get from, Spain or Portugal to, or even the UK to Italy, despite the fact that it should be, you get on a train and it will go very fast and stop at the major cities. Like I'm in the sense like the Trenitalia, the Frecciarossa, like you can go from Reggio Calabria all the way to Torino in like, I don't know, 9 hours, something like that, 7 hours, which is really not bad at all. But to get then from like Torino to Barcelona might take 14, given the fact that you have to switch so often and it's not a straight line.
And it's expensive, unfortunately. Like
and
you said, what was your example number?
I think it's like 400 to 500 last time we checked.
Okay.
Because we checked going from Rome to Paris once, thinking it'd be kind of, that'd be kind of cute. Like we would spend the night on the train, we'd wake up, we'd have dinner not dinner at the morning, but the breakfast, I think, in the morning. And, we wake up on the way to Paris and it's wildly expensive.
That's interesting because, I think I compared the cost of this ferry from Barcelona to Civitavecchia it's about the same price as a decent flight. And I think that was around 200 euros.
Wow, okay.
Something like that, 150 to 200 is
for a one way or for round trip? I don't know if you remember.
One way.
Okay. That's really, that's also, the ferry is cheaper then, because I looked at a couple of ferries. I looked at a ferry from Barcelona to Genoa, and with a room, it's 130. But if you are, like, for instance, if you're a family listening to this and you think that actually might be an interesting option, and maybe to slow down the trip a little bit in terms of, we've talked about in the past that a lot of times if you're hopping from city to city, you can easily get burned out. And if you kind of want to hit the reset ever so slightly between countries, the ferry could be a good option, but it's only, I think, 400 euros to get a family suite. Wow. That's supposed to sleep, I think, 4 to 6, depending on.
And that's not a price per person.
That's right. That's the total price.
Wow.
So that's cheaper than, because if judging by the four tickets, it might be 800 euros. Who knows what the train would be?
Yeah, I like that idea. There's also in my research I found, so there's what my mom was going to take. There we go. And it was simple but not uncomfortable.
Okay.
The boat style, essentially, to me. But I found another today, which was a little bit more, not activities based, but there was a full.
Is it a Norwegian one? Or?
No.
Oh, okay.
This was a ferry.
Oh,
it just
okay.
Also had a full restaurant. And I think there was, the mass sitting area for the really inexpensive tickets, but there were also different it had a pool on top. I know.
Where was it go? Where was it?
It was
Should
going
we take
from
this?
I know, it was going from Spain to Italy.
Wow.
Yeah, and they had several different boats and options for travels, but that, I think, for anybody who wants to slow down a little bit, it's certainly for families, I think that would be an interesting way to get from point A to point B. It's a little more expensive, but I think it was like, I don't know, I want to say like 300 a person, so a little more expensive, but it's an interesting sort of fun, quirky way of getting around.
It definitely goes back to that slow travel idea. Of course, if you're American listening to this and you only have 2 weeks of paid vacation, you're probably going to be flying. Like your mother, for instance, who can't really sacrifice the 20 hours because that means, that's an entire day on top of the day it takes to arrive, the day it takes to leave. And then all of a sudden 20 hours on a boat is sort of not in that's, it's more of the trip than like that becomes the event, if that makes sense, rather than the being in Barcelona or being in Rome.
Right.
So I apologize. This was so far going on this tangent.
I think it was a good tangent, though.
Oh,
I feel like we squared up what a a ferry would look like if that's something that you want to take. From particularly from Spain to Italy, but I know there are similar options, like you said, going from Italy to Greece or Italy to Tunisia, things like that. There's similar options.
In Croatia, I know the Croatia's up to in Montenegro for some reason, not for some reason, but it seems like if people kind of do the Adriatic little circle of Bari, Ravenna, Venice,
Ravenna, I think.
Okay, I'll take Ravenna, Trieste, and then down like Eastern Europe sort of thing, and then end. But no, I think, and when we talk about cruise, I think just going back to this idea is the bigger cruise lines, the Carnival Cruise, the Royal Caribbean, which also does Mediterranean cruises, interestingly enough. The Celebrity Cruise, which I had to do a lot of research to find out.
Do they have celebrities there?
They do not.
Okay.
So I was super confused.
Is it to make you feel like you're a celebrity?
I think so.
Okay.
I looked into that because I was like, oh, celebrity cruises, like you are on a cruise with a celebrity, which is a weird experience, I think.
But some people do that. People do cruise tours.
Wait, what do you mean?
Celebrities do. Like somebody will do it, like you know how celebrities will do a stint in Vegas? Sometimes some celebrities will do a stint on a cruise.
I think it meant like they're giving the tour. I'm like, but I don't understand. They have to do all this research to give this tour.
No,
okay, that makes sense. Well, that's apparently Gwyneth Paltrow did the Goop something or another.
Goop Cruise?
Goop Cruise, I guess.
Okay, I don't know.
And it was supposed to be her company is Goop, and you go there and it's a wellness cruise. I don't really know. There's a chef did one on the celebrity lines. There was a celebrity chef did like, he wasn't cooking, he was just there. And like, hey, he met our chef. It's a little, so I think it's just to make you feel like a celebrity. It's supposed to be a step above Royal Caribbean and Carnival in terms of, I guess, what you're given. And because what you were telling me too is to anybody listening, I really am very uneducated when it comes to cruises. I've never been on one. I don't really know much about them. For a very brief moment in 2013, I thought I should work on a cruise before people who worked on cruises like, you're probably not going to like it.
It seems horrible to work on a cruise.
They enjoyed it. They just know who I am. And they're like, you're not going to like it.
In college, I talked to some people who worked on a cruise and they were like, yeah, it was very intense. And some of what they told me to me seemed like horror stories.
Yeah. I think it's like I have to be like the right kind of person type of thing. And it seems intense. So I don't have that much experience with cruises, which is all to say, if I'm sounding surprised by some of these things, like I think you mentioned to me that one of these cruises you can buy the soda package, which was baffling to me.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means in terms of like, was it not already free? I thought it was free. I'm locked on a boat with you guys. I thought you would give me food for free. I thought that's how this worked. I didn't realize that. I am now locked on a boat and also I have to buy food, because it seems kind of like an interesting business plan when you get a bunch of people, put them in the middle of the Mediterranean and say, hey, the food was not free.
Yeah, that seems like a Lord of the Flies situation.
It really does.
Yeah, so what I found, I kind of wanted to understand better, like you're saying, the experience on one of these big cruises. We are no longer talking about a ferry. We've ended our ferry portion of this podcast.
The ferry portion is over. Thank you all so much. We love ferries, Tinkerbell #1, and we have now moved on to cruises.
Yeah.
Tom, Robinson, Crusoe. Never mind, that didn't work.
Just Tom.
Just Tom. Sorry, Tom.
So I wanted to understand better what these sort of, to me, massive cruises are like, these big, big boats. And like you said, I was baffled to find some of what I found. So some of it was, like you said, you have to pay for the soda package if you want extra soda, I guess. It does seem like there are, you have a set amount of meals that you get per day, because you've paid to be there, you've paid for your room, and it seems like the sort of quote unquote basic package comes with some things. So that is, to be fair, a benefit, I think, if you don't want to constantly, if you're traveling and you don't want to think about, oh my gosh, where am I going to eat tonight or for lunch or whatever, that is set up for you on the cruise. With these big cruises, there are several different restaurants to choose from, and it often seems like the food is catered towards their typical clientele, and a lot of the time that means Americans. So a lot of the food is going to be something that you're used to, or there will likely be an option for some food that you know what it is. It's not going to be, I don't know, something weird to you.
It also might not be traditional food from the area you're going to.
It will not be traditional food from the place that you're going to. If that's something that you want, do not take one of these big cruises. So if you're looking, yeah, I'm trying to find silver linings here in these big cruises. So you, at least you know that you're going to have access to, your 2 meals a day, and it's going to be somewhat normal food to what you're used to. However, like you said, there's this soda package with the Norwegian cruises. So I was looking at a blog review, and this person was saying, so if you're someone who really likes, sodas, I would say, you buy in for the soda package. And then there's also other drinks packages, like for alcohol. There was added access to other restaurants. It seems to me like there were just a lot of somewhat hidden add-ons, and that would scare me as a traveler, not knowing that if I'm locked in a place because you're stuck on this boat.
Right, yeah, you can't get off.
Right, what you do and don't have access to, what you have to pay extra for, because if you're staying on land in a city or a large town, if nothing else, you will have access to a grocery store,
Yeah, exactly.
So it just seemed a little crazy that there might be extra things that you have to pay for. Some of the other things that broke my brain were, I know that there are pools on these big ships. I know that there are water slides on these big ships, but some of them have like entire water parks. One had a go-kart track. There were, one of the things that I don't really understand about cruises, but if you like this, go off, friends. I'm happy for you. Is that there are like entertainment rooms, but it's not necessarily like a big Broadway show or some big act or, I don't know, comedian or singer. Sometimes it's just like, there was an example of everybody playing Deal or No Deal, the game show.
Okay.
Which I found
can see that being
really interesting.
Fun.
But
I mean, it is fun, but like maybe like, yeah, okay.
Basically, moreover, it's if you're taking one of these,
love that
big,
word.
Moreover.
Just amazing.
Insomma, I think is kind of similar in Italian. Don't quote me on that. But anyways, so moreover, if you're taking one of these big cruises, you have got to be somebody who enjoys being on a cruise. That is your trip.
I think that's the big takeaway.
Your trip is being on the cruise, and you happen to be seeing some cities sometimes. But you really, I don't think, will be experiencing the cities that you're going to, which is a shame, obviously, because you're traveling, but also because these big cruises that I'm talking about, as well as some of the ones that are slightly smaller but still big, like Viking cruises now has Viking Ocean cruises, and I believe their ships are slightly smaller and a little bit more of an intimate situation, but nevertheless, you're going to a new city every day, and you're not obviously dropped right in the middle of the city like you would be at a train station or staying inside the city. You're put at the port, or even the port of the next town over. So you don't have a lot of time to actually experience each city because you're moving so quickly and you're not always centrally located.
And I mean, first off, that was very nice nutshelling.
Thanks.
And I think this is also to say, too, for anybody who does take cruises, who likes cruises, you probably already know whether or not you're going to take a cruise in Italy. It might be like the thing you do, like if you've seen the Caribbean this way, if you've seen South America or Alaska this way, or I know there's a lot in sort of Southeast Asia, there are a lot of cruises. So if that's your mode of transportation, then obviously this is not to scare you off. It is more to give you an idea that, as we have mentioned earlier, and as you just mentioned now, that you might not see as much as you think you will. Mm-hmm. It's not like you're going to poke your head out the window and like, oh, there's the Leaning Tower of Pisa and the Duomo in Florence, or, the Hill of Siena or anything like that. It's a bit more, I guess you get shuttled around and then you end up on a bus. And now that you've given the silver linings, I thought I could give some of the cloud bit. No, but simply, we have talked about in the Venice episode, they ended up not allowing cruise ships of a certain size, I think partly through the Grand Canal, but also just anywhere near Venice. Like you now have to dock.
Well, they were an ecological disaster for Venice.
For Venice, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a place that is already drowning, and it does not help, I think, to have a cruise ship go through. It also didn't help, as we've talked about before, and this goes back to it's hard to be, obviously, we've talked about it's hard to be a sustainable or ethical traveler when the system that allows you to travel is not ethical, if that makes sense. It's sort of like, I think we've talked about this before, and we talked about just a second ago, even with the flights. It's like, how do you get from, the United States to Europe without a flight and without a few $1,000s for a ship. It's not really a feasible thing. And I say that as somebody who's looked into these ships, and like even just being a passenger on a cargo ship is like $2,500 to $3,200.
I think it used to be like the cheap, sneaky way, not sneaky, but like
A backpacker's secret.
exactly, like a somewhat secret way to travel, and not very expensive. But like you said, now it is quite expensive.
It is, and it's not a. It's. I think it's also not feasible because genuinely, I mean, like, let's say it takes 5 or 7 days to get across the ocean. Not only, as you just mentioned, with the cruise ships, are you not anywhere near where you need to be, because even in like we're from Savannah, which has a pretty large port. The port is absolutely nowhere near the town in terms of like walking distance, in terms of a rental car, in terms of, I mean, it's like the port has like 8 strip clubs and like a Texas Roadhouse or Texas Steakhouse or something.
It is near another town called Garden City.
Right, but I mean like right near the port.
Right
There's
near
like
the
a couple
port
of strip
is-
clubs
yeah.
and like a chain restaurant. And it's not, so it's not easy to get to. And I think in my experience with Europe, at the very least Italy, has been very similar. Like the port is not, where you mentioned the train station is oftentimes the middle of town, which again is unfortunately not the same in a lot of places in the States. They did, the train kind of came after a lot of the towns, so they just kind of built it on the outside of town. But in Italy, at least, a lot of the train stations are still in the middle of town, or at least close to the area where you need to be. But it just becomes, so this idea that, you know, it's ethical to travel, it's sustainable to travel by boat, or sustainable to travel not by plane. It's sort of like, it's also not possible by and large. And when you're here, it's one thing, but when you're not here, it's another. So that little fun rant was all simply to say that it is not always like the idea of, if you're going to take a cruise ship, and, you know, I know that we talked about Venice, and they talked about how part of the reason they instituted this €5 charge is because the tourist
Tax
fee thing,
Yeah.
just to enter the town, was because of cruise ships. You had a couple thousand people disembarking, going around town, not having lunch, not eating anything, not basically contributing to the economy, and then getting back on the ship, as you mentioned, to eat food that is more familiar, to sleep in a bed that they've been sleeping in, to you know, enjoy the water sports or the go karts or whatever it is. And so people weren't really seeing the area. And even actually, I looked at a couple of these just to have some information, because I was a little bit curious about these tours, or not the tours, the cruises. And they do offer tours, obviously, as part of the package, but it's a tour guide from the ship. So again, that goes back to the idea that it's not a tour company in Venice
You're not
itself.
contributing to the local economy.
Yeah, and it's actually, some of them very fascinating too. It's like they have the one of them had the classic tour, so it's like the Doge's Palace and then the St. Mark's Square
In Venice?
Okay. And the other one had the Discovery Tour, where it was, they take you around a neighborhood called Dorso Duro, which is like just like a, I don't know, just a cute neighborhood, one of Venice's 5 or 6 neighborhoods. And I just think it's kind of funny where they have one that's like if you just want to see what you're supposed to see in Venice, we have that. But if you want to wander around a neighborhood, and you know, you can do that. So it's a little, that I think is one of the negative aspects, is that, and tying in with the idea that you're not going to be near a city, is you have to kind of commit. Going to Rome, for instance, you have to commit to be in Rome. It's not like, I'm going to go for an hour and then come back. It's like, it's an hour drive. It's going to be on a bus unless you want to pay for your own taxi. It's not reachable in terms of, it's not like an easily reachable area. I think there's a train, but not really, in terms of like, it's just as much of a pain to get to as anything else. So it doesn't really fit this idea of like a train trip. You can just hop on, hop off. Like, yeah.
That's something I found, is that it's a lot less freedom whenever you're on a cruise. It is, I guess, one of the benefits that I forgot to mention is that, like you said, you are always staying in the same room. So that seems cool. That's
Once
convenient.
you unpack, you're good.
Exactly. Lovely. I mean, for personal things, it's lovely. But you are on someone else's schedule when you're not on the cruise. On the cruise seems like a wild time. Like this Norwegian cruise one, the restaurants are open 24 hours, and there's a casino, and there's this and there's that. It is like another dimension. So there's freedom in that.
Sort of like an airport.
Yes.
You know, where it's
very
24
much.
hours. I mean, not the casino maybe, but like, it's just time doesn't exist. There's no windows.
That is very much the sense that time doesn't exist here on these cruises. But whenever you're actually visiting these places, you are on someone else's schedule, which wouldn't work well for me. But if you're someone who doesn't really, who kind of just wants to be taken around and not thinking about how to get from point A to B, it could work for you.
And actually, on that note, just because it's a fun little anecdote, we were in Florence at the Uffizi, and we noticed a couple of these rooms were just mobbed with people, and we thought, oh, this is going to be a nightmare. Like, I had no idea the Uffizi. I mean, it's the Uffizi, so it's kind of like, of course, it's famous, it's popular, it has beautiful pieces of artwork, but it's not. I guess I was thinking it'd be more chill,
Yes.
in terms of art museums, and then we realized it was all part of a cruise. And they walked past this room, and we heard one of the guys ask the tour guide, saying, hey, like, can we go see what's in there? He's like, unfortunately, no, we only have time to see, I think it was like 6 pieces, and then we have to get back on the bus, and we're going back.
And how many pieces would you say are on display in the Uffizi?
Like 2,700.
Yeah.
I'm just ballparking at the fact that...
I mean, thousands.
Tons of art is on
And
display.
they were going to see specifically 6 or 7.
Yeah. And interestingly, they kind of didn't see ones that are famous. In terms, let me rephrase this. They might have had 15 famous pieces and they saw 6 of them. It's sort of like, I don't know, going to the Louvre and seeing the Mona Lisa and a handful of others, but not like seeing any of the Rembrandts or any of the whatever, it's...
And the Uffizi is so big that it seemed to me like they were avoiding some of the more farther reaching bits. Like even a lot of the Caravaggio pieces were not down a weird hallway, but they weren't necessarily next to all the other art.
Yes.
So I don't think the tour even went down to the Caravaggio pieces, which I'm like,
and that
that's
was
kind of why a lot of people come to this country.
What's the one, the famous piece of Medusa painted on a shield? It's like on their brochures as a famous piece, and they skipped that one, and I was like, that's what they think is
painting.
What you should be coming here for. So I thought that was fascinating because it does seem like, again, not to be negative, but it's essentially you're in a place that you're not allowed to leave unless you're let off the ship. You have to pay for the food you're eating. You can't necessarily, there's not a grocery store on board, so you have to like at a restaurant or something like that. When you're allowed to leave, it typically seems to be in tour groups unless there is a free day. And some of them do, I will say, I will get into it in a minute, but they do have a free day. Like you just go wander around and come back, and hopefully won't leave without you. And I assume, but a lot of them are you join this thing and it's like, no, we have the restaurant picked out. We're going to have lunch at. So you're going to get on the bus. You're going to go there. We're going to have lunch. We're going to go on this tour of a place. It's going to be exactly 45 minutes. If it's too long, we're going to skip the rest of it. We're going to get back on the bus and we're going to come back here. And I guess I'm assuming part of this has to do with like, I don't really know. I don't know if it's like there's a hassle on getting people on and off a ship. I don't know if it's a roll call thing. I don't know if it's some sort of like...
Probably. It also, I imagine, depending on where they're docked, it takes a while to get the boat safely in and out of the port. And they probably have schedules for being able to get to the next place.
And so I'm assuming it basically, as you mentioned too, it's good if you want to spend, like take a lump sum, $4,000, and you want to say like, that's it. I'm just going to put $4,000 to this trip. I don't want to worry about food. I don't want to worry about lodging. I want to have some stuff to do when I'm not sleeping or eating. And yeah, if I get to see some fun stuff in Italy, then I think maybe the cruise makes sense. But if you like your own time, if you like your own schedule, if you're kind of wanting to just explore things on your own, not
you
like
to actually experience what another country is like.
Yes.
I would not say taking a cruise is the right choice.
And actually, I think that kind of leads to potentially, unless there's something else on the big cruise ships, it does lead to the next bit, which is about river cruises.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we might circle back to the sea cruises because I might have forgotten something to mention, but I did look up river cruises because not Italy, I guess a lot of places in Europe have river cruises.
Yes, and there are many rivers in Europe.
There really are. There's a lot. And a lot of them are the same river, just with different names in different countries. So that's kind of fun.
Huh. They should, train companies should take an idea from that. Just like we were talking about earlier.
Oh, I'm like...
That was a really broad idea. Let me specify. The river runs through...
They should create a river. I'm like, okay, I don't get it.
The river runs through
multiple countries. And it just changes the name.
Yes. So what if you stayed on the same train, but the train just like changed its name?
I love that.
Or
you should pitch that to them, actually.
You get a fresh team on.
Yeah.
So it's like the Italian team stops, they get a little vacation in Nice. They take a couple days.
I love that. I love this for you. And we have a couple days in Nice or whatever.
I'm making it a vacation for the train workers.
Yeah. We're going to Santa Monica.
Yeah. And then the French crew hop on and they take you to Spain. And then they hop off. They get a little vacation. You get the Spanish crew. And then you do the whole thing in reverse.
In reverse. I love that. So Darcy's already planning out vacations for other people.
Should I just be a railroad tycoon?
You should. Yes. Move aside, Carnegie. We have Darcy. Both Scottish. Really not, actually. Only one of them is Scottish.
Carnegie was Scottish?
Yes, believe it or not.
Okay.
Also, we have our public libraries to thank for Carnegie because apparently he couldn't read growing up, so he wanted to make sure everybody could read, which is a weird thing about how like people are like, we don't need like programs like libraries anymore because rich people fund libraries, and it was like, well, it's the whole thing.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I'm super grateful that he made libraries in the U.S. because there aren't always libraries, and I mean there are like libraries in other countries, but I feel like often they are associated with universities and things like that, and there aren't just public libraries. It blew my mind
that Italy does not have. I mean, it does have some, but not really. Like even some of them too that we went into, we would try to go into a public library, a library in Florence, and you could only go in if you're a student. And I'm like, but
other people like books, y'all.
Yeah, like can I just go look at the books? I don't have to check out a book. And we couldn't find public libraries in a lot of places, which is weird. So sorry for that fun little brief aside on libraries.
We should do a podcast
on the time libraries.
A podcast, an episode.
We should just entirely change only a bag to only a book, and you can combine them. Only a book bag. It's about school systems in Italy. You guys are. This is evolution in real time, y'all. You're welcome. So river cruises are kind of what I wanted to not necessarily end on, but definitely tie in because, and we didn't even cut there. This is just live. So I wanted to end on them though because I think. You mentioned Viking earlier, and it's a popular company to take river cruises around. And I think there's an idea that, and I think honestly, France and Eastern Europe and Germany and maybe Belgium, I'm not really sure, definitely sort of feed into this idea that like, oh, you could take river boats everywhere. Like we were in Caen, I believe it was, and a lot of people had those little river boats, and you could sail them down the Seine to Paris, and you could sail them somewhere else. I don't know any other places on the river in France, but I'm like, that seems great. In Scotland, we learned that there are all these canal systems being, at least this was 6 years ago, they were refurbishing this canal system that used to be coal transport, I think, and then they kind of drained a lot of the canals because like we're not using it for coal anymore. But then people are like, whoa, riverboats. So they're kind of revamping some of the canals because in Edinburgh, and I know in like London, and I know in Glasgow, there were riverboats, like you know, kind of like I guess the canals in Amsterdam or something where you'd sleep on the boat. And so they're like, what if you can kind of get around Scotland like that? So they're trying, I know that last I'd heard, again, 6 years ago, I don't know if it's done at this point or if it fell by the wayside, but it was an attempt to refurbish these canals to be used for boats. So
love that.
Yeah. And so it kind of makes, you're like, okay, Italy. Not every major city. Some major cities in Italy have a river.
Many major cities have a big, well-known river in them.
Well, I'm thinking you have Torino. You have I don't know what theirs is, the Po River, I imagine. I don't know if Milan has a river going through it or if it's just near the Po River. I can't remember. I think it's near it too, because we've only been to Milan for like once, and the last time I looked on a map, which is like 2 hours ago, I cannot remember. But Rome has a river running through it. Florence has a river running through it. Technically, Venice does. It's called the Grand Canal. But no, it's a lot of these Italian cities do have a river around it or near it or running through it. And you can easily think that there would be a river cruise. And my exhaustive research of typing in Italy river cruise, Italy best river cruise in Italy, and then I think it did like budget river cruise in Italy just to see if there's a different option. There's really only one type of river cruise. And it's in, almost all of them start in Florence. Nope. That would be a weird place to start, given the fact that it has a river that has a giant bridge across it that you cannot really pass through. They all start in Venice. And one of my favorite one goes from Venice, like there's this, I'm completely spacing the name now. It's amazing. Like when we record this podcast, I completely forget things because I'm like super nervous that people are going to listen to this.
Yeah, like me with Italian.
Exactly. And now I can't remember. But just south of Venice, there's sticking out on a little peninsula, there's a town. And so it spends 2 nights or 3 nights in Venice, and you go to this town for 2 nights, and you go back to Venice for 3 nights. So I'm like, it's a hotel. You basically are on a hotel for 3 nights.
But isn't it only like a 20-minute journey?
Is it longer than that? It's super. I mean, maybe an hour, but okay. yeah, it's super short in terms of travel time. But when I looked at like, there's a luxury cruise, a really kind of fancy luxury cruise, and it starts in Venice and it ends up in Muatawa. Manatua, maybe Manatua. Nope, something.
Okay, I've never heard of that place.
I also had never heard of it.
This place is in Italy?
This place is in Italy.
Okay.
I know. This was crazy to me. I was like, I've never heard of this place. And they're talking about all these places they hit along the way. I'm like, I've never heard of any. The only place I'd heard of was Venice and Ferrara. And those are the only 2 places it hits. And then it ends in, I think it's Manatua, for instance. That's vibing with me, but I'm also like, maybe that was an island in Moana, so I'm not really sure. So I'm kind of like, maybe that's Maybe I'm not right on that. So I looked at their thing. I looked on Google Maps, and it's like we stop in this town and that town, and they are like 6 building towns. Like in the sense of there are 6 buildings in this town, and then and I finally found, I think the path they go is a canal, is like a man-made canal that must have been used for transport, because there's the Po River that it doesn't seem like they're on, and then there's a canal next to it that must be what they're on, because it's all these little tiny towns. But I mean, there's got to be like 18 people living in some of these towns, and then
That's kind of cool though.
Well, it seems fascinating. I mean, it's pricey in terms of, I mean, I guess it's really not. It's a week long for 2,700 euros or something like that. So
it's not terrible.
It's not terrible if you're thinking about it's 7 nights of sleeping. And I don't know if food or stuff is included, but it's supposed to be luxury, so I'm assuming it's included. And that might be the one that was the closest to a traditional river cruise in terms of what I would consider a river cruise, I guess. Like it goes from one point to another, rather than like some, like, I mean, I think an example would be in Paris on the Seine, the Seine. Seine. Okay, I know there's like drop-in some syllables somewhere. So on the Seine, there are these little boats that go up and down the Seine, and they're like these river boats. They're dinner boats. They're pleasure craft, which just really makes them sound terrible. I guess they're just for people to go sightseeing from the river. And I think Rome has tried to do the same thing, but there's only one little stretch of Rome that has a deep enough part to do that.
Yes.
The rest of it is like riverbank and reeds and rocks and seagulls chilling out. So you can't.
And some of it's deep enough for like kayakers to be in. And what are the big long ones called? People who just rowing teams.
Yeah, rowing teams. What is that
I
called?
feel like that boat craft thingy has a special name.
Probably.
But anyways, there's places in the along the Tiber inside of Rome that are deep enough for that, but a lot of it is not deep enough for you to take any sort of boat, through the city.
And I think that's the thing, though. It's easy to think that it is, and it's easy to think that these river boats will do that. But I'm like, a lot of them seem like, even there's one for Venice, and I'm like, you just scoot up into Venice slightly, and then you scoot out.
A lot of the canals in Venice are big enough for the
for sure.
Whatever they're called,
The Vaporetto?
Yeah, the Vaporetti. They're big enough for that, but they're not big enough for anything bigger than that to get through.
That was actually one of these river cruises, was a river cruise of Venice. And it went to I think it went to the Murano.
Okay.
And then back to Venice. And I'm like, that's what a Vaporetto does.
Yeah, that's a water taxi.
That's literally, but like you sleep on the boat, which I'm getting, if the purpose is sleeping on the boat, amazing experience. And because these are much smaller, I will say these river cruises are, I think the luxury one is 100-person.
Okay.
Cruise ship thing, and it's got like above deck, but then all the rooms are kind of like, a lot of them face this. I think the expensive ones face the outside, and the cheap ones face the inside. No windows, I guess, so just cabin. And there's a deck, and it seems cute, and it's just more of a. It seems like Italy does not have an industry around cruises or river cruises because it doesn't really work.
One thing that you mentioned off mic before we started was that you found something that advertised itself as a river cruise.
I did.
But it was not.
And that's, I think, kind of what I wanted to... I keep going back to this point of, like, you have to pay super special attention to where this ship is going. And this one specifically was a river cruise going from Venice to Milan. And I was like, that's insane. That doesn't seem possible. Like, is it going around the boot? Like, I don't understand how it's doing this. And so I looked into this. It is not doing this. It is going to that place, Mantua. Yeah, I'm not sure the name of it.
Okay.
And from there, you get a bus to Milan. You spend the night in a hotel in Milan. Then you go to Lake Como, where I guess you go around on a boat for part of the day. But then, like, later that day, the cruise ends.
Land transit to Como.
Right.
Okay.
So, which is obviously on the water, but not, I don't think...
But it's a lake.
Yeah.
It's not, yeah.
But, I mean, I don't think some of these have a way of, like, taking a boat from the lake to, a different, like, along the river somewhere else, but not this one. It's like, it's just, you just happen to go from one body of water to another on land. And then it's over. And I think that's something I wanted to mention as, like, maybe the last thing I wanted to mention in terms of, or this will be the last thing I wanted to mention, I think, that maybe are the negatives of a cruise. I did not realize. I assumed a cruise picked you up and dropped you off in the same spot, because I'm used to the ones, I guess, in America where it's like, we leave from Miami and after 7 days, we're back in Miami. These do not. A lot of these are starting in, like, Barcelona, or they start in Croatia, or they start in Rome, and then they go 7 days or 5 days or 4 days, whatever it is, in one direction. And then they're like, okay, good luck. This was the end. You have now arrived in a different city entirely.
I think that's the benefit for some people, though. Like my mom and aunt, they would like to go to Spain, Italy, and Croatia. So that was, they had the intention of it being a mode of transit from one place to another.
That makes sense.
But I think there are a lot of people who don't plan on that, like you're saying, and you end up in another country.
Like, I think too, because it's a round trip ticket has like a sense of safety attached to it. Like if anything goes wrong, I know that all I have to do is find a place to be for X amount of nights and I'll be fine. But if you have a ticket that like lands in Barcelona and leaves out of like, I don't know, Split or something like that. I don't know if they Dubrovnik, I don't think, Croatia, let's just say. I'm not sure where they would have a small airport, but then, and if somehow like you missed your thing or if something happens, some emergency happens, you have to still figure out, I'm like, this sort of, family National Lampoon thing across Europe to get to your flight. Like, that's ridiculous. Like planes, trains, and automobiles across the entire continent to get to where your flight leaves. But I'm thinking like if you flew into Rome and you were going to leave Civitavecchia, and you were going to come back in like 7 days. And if something happens, you miss your thing, you get super sick, you break your leg, hopefully not. But, if something crazy
Some emergency happens, yeah.
Then it's like, all right, you hang out for 7 days and you'll be fine. You can figure it out. That's okay. But like trying to figure out, and I think that's something that a lot of people, even if you're not used to traveling, you can kind of wrap your brain around. Like stay safe for 7 days, find a hotel, find a good place to eat, rest, whatever. You're going to be fine. But I think the idea of like, oh, I have to get to a different country and I've just spent all my money on something that I, don't have that money again. And I'm not really sure how to order, because I think even you and I are, we've talked about this before, and I think this was actually going to be the only piece of news I had, and I've completely forgotten to mention it. But we've talked about before how you and I are used to booking trains in Italy. It's like second nature. And I think my dad, when he visited, your mom, when she visited, when my brother visited, even my mom, who has lived here for like 9 years, 10 years, have trouble using the website to book trains. And to me, it's a very straightforward website. It's the from, it's the to, it's the day you want to leave, it's the time you want to leave. And they give you a list of trains and you click which one you want and you click pay. And like, it's a very straightforward thing. And there seems to be like a difficulty with understanding it because and part of it is, granted, Rome has minimum of 2 train stations. You might leave from any of 4, but it's probably going to be one of the 2 major ones. Same thing with Florence. Same thing with, you take a train to Venice, you might have gotten off in Mestre instead of the Santa Maria is I think the main train station in Venice. So I get there's some confusion to it. But ultimately it's, I guess, straightforward. So I'm just thinking for people who might, I don't know, this idea that like trying to get from Rome to Barcelona and it's like, okay, I have to book a flight, I have to book this, I have to figure out how to get to the airport in Barcelona and the airport in Rome, and I have to figure out this. But it seems like why would you ever do that? Not people who take cruises, but the cruise line themselves. Like, why would you add to somebody's stress of, we'll drop you off, we'll pick you up in one city and drop you off in another.
Yeah, I don't know. I think for some people, like you're saying, it definitely is a stress and not a benefit. But for other people, it is a benefit, and you just hope that nothing bad happens along the way.
Yeah, which
is kind of just travel.
Yeah.
In some ways.
That being said, if they invented like a cruise ship that had sails, which I think is called a sailing ship, I would be very excited to take it.
I really think you should learn to sail first.
I really think I was hopefully going to pay other people to do it.
I think there is some innate risk in being on a sailing ship.
Yes, but you feel so much cooler.
Yes, for sure. Let's learn to sail.
Okay.
And speaking of which, actually, I just do want to put in a little tidbit to say that if you have listened to this and you really had your heart set on being on the Italian open waters, and we've totally bummed you out, fear not.
That happens often.
That we bum people out?
Yes. Oh, you wanted to do this fun thing? Oh, think again.
There are so many places and ways that you can be on the water, take a little boat that are not taking a cruise.
Absolutely.
We are looking at we are going to Venice in February for Carnevale, and we will definitely have an episode for you all on Carnevale. But I recently found out that, obviously you can take the Vaporetto, you can take, which is like a water taxi, you can take the a gondola, but you can also essentially rent a captain and a small boat for the day.
I love that.
To take you to this specific one. It seemed like a little family-owned business, which I love. And they go to this not little island. There are people who live on this other island. There is a single trattoria. There's a single little restaurant. But there were different options for this person, taking you out on the boat for the day. And you could even throw in an aperitivo. They're going to put like a bottle of Prosecco on the boat, essentially, and maybe a couple little snacky things. Or you can rent it for a sunset romantic evening thing, and it was only 400 euros, which is out of our budget, but not wildly expensive for a fun activity, if you're having a special trip.
Especially because a gondola is already like $70 a person.
Those are very expensive.
So I'm like, for like double that, you could just be on a boat by yourself.
Yeah.
Without other people.
And a cool sounding captain person.
Yeah. Somebody is not singing to you. And you're going much faster.
I don't think they sing.
That's probably good. I mean, I would be so uncomfortable, I feel like. I realize. Just somebody's singing there and I'm like, trying to talk. Like, no, this is really interesting. Thank you for singing. This is super interesting. So what'd you say the name was? Yeah, it'd be terrible.
I don't know. And if you're going to Capri, there's obviously lots of boat tours that you can
There's a lot of just private people, not private people you can rent, but private boats piloted, captained by people that you could pay them money and
you can pay them for an excursion.
Yeah, and that's a good way to see the not the Blue Lagoon. What is it? The Blue Cave, the Grotto.
Blue Grotto.
Yeah, is that what it's called?
The Blue Grotto, right?
Blue Grotto. So that's a big. I mean, obviously that one you can only see, I think, at some times of the year, and only when it's chill weather. Because if it isn't, then you smack your head on the rock, and it's just a whole disaster. It's a whole thing. So again, this is we bum people out. But yeah, no, I think there's a lot of ways you can rent a boat around. I mean, obviously like Como and things like that, but it's not. It's still very possible if you're like, I really wanted to go somewhere. And as you mentioned earlier, the ferries, I think, are a great option to go. If you just like, I have extra time, I just want to chill, you can absolutely take a ferry from like Salerno or Naples, even all the way up to like Genoa, or La Spezia, if you wanted to go to Cinque Terre. And you're like, I want to check out Cinque Terre, I want to get there slow, I don't really need to speed all the way there. You can absolutely just take a ferry all the way up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, was that everything?
Before? I think so. Yeah.
For those of you who have made it this far, I want to give you a fun little piece of information that we've given you probably 5 or 6 times before, but because, as Darcy just mentioned, we are going to Venice in February for Carnevale, and we were booking train tickets, and for some ungodly reason, my Trenitalia website defaulted into English, and I was like, it's such a weird looking website when it's in English, because I'm used to these really Italian looking pop-up ads, so I'm like, what is going on? And so I went to the Italian website, and I found out that on the Italian version, there was a discount code. And I went back to the English version, not necessarily the American version, because they use the little British flag. And there's no discount code, nowhere, like on the website. So we've mentioned this before in the booking trains episode, but if you are booking a train in Italy, we've mentioned before that we use sometimes like Trainline or another like Omio or something like that, because they do default into English, and it is a little bit of an easier experience just in terms of, I know it's a lot like booking a flight. Like it's sort of a very, very standardized way. I think maybe, again, the Trenitalia website is confusing to some degree. But if you are going to use the Trenitalia website, we highly recommend, or at least I highly recommend, using the Italian website and just using if you use Google Chrome or if you use Firefox or Safari, using the translate option to kind of see.
Is that something you have to add on? Not
on Chrome. And I think not currently on Firefox, so that they have the beta translate thing. It's like still in beta. You can add one on. I don't know for Safari. I assume there's one built in, but there might be an add-on. I don't even know if Safari does add-ons. I have not used Safari in some years because it's awful.
Okay. So just so you guys know, so I use Chrome to search for travel things.
You use Firefox.
I use Firefox. Thank you, Nathaniel. It's a circly looking thing. I use Firefox, and in my browser where I go like in the search bar, there's a little translate. It almost looks like a little book. I think it has an A on it or something. And that if you click that button, you can click translate options, and it will translate the web page that you are on.
And that is helpful. I will throw it in there just in case. It does make it really confusing too, because this, I think, was really catching up your mom and my dad and my brother. Is I think when you look when you're looking for a trip in English, you can use Rome and Florence and Venice, but when you're looking for a trip on the Italian website, you have to use Roma, Firenze, Venezia, the Italian word for the city. Otherwise, it will not show up. And I know that because I type in Rome, and it's like, I don't even know if that's a country or a city or anything. But the reason I mentioned that is on the Italian website, like right just above where it has like, you put in your from and to, is usually like a little, what is that, a carousel? Is that what they call that? Of like different ads. Like if you
and they are always running discounts, trying to tell you. Yeah.
For sure. And I think the recent one we just got was 30% off any class, as long as it's a super economy ticket or freighter days, which just meant Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And the reason I mentioned that is because that basically we took business class because we're like, 30% off, that's fancy. Let's fancy it up. Mm-hmm. And it ended up being cheaper than 30% off business ended up being cheaper than the super economy without the 30% off. So It was kind of like, why not kind of thing. And I mentioned that simply too, because if you are traveling with family, it is something that does add up, obviously. And you should already get discounts, but sometimes there's discounts on top of discounts.
Yes.
And you just have to kind of, again, I don't know why, but on the English site, it's like, I've never seen an ad. And this one, the only difference is this one, you had to have a discount code. Some of the offers on the Train Italia website will be automatically applied. For instance, if you're traveling with 2 people or more, they'll offer you the traveling together or the 2+1.
Train Italia is almost like what was that TV show, like extreme couponing show, where people they spent their time clipping all these coupons and they doubled them up and got cash back and
exactly
all these things.
Like.
Train Italia, if you use the Italian version of the site, if you translate it, if you don't speak Italian, translate the page and just click all of look through what they're offering, because like Nathaniel's saying, you can double and triple up their discounts and you're not like hacking the system or anything. They have made it that way. It's not intentionally confusing. They're just Italian. And you can get 2 for 1, which the me and you price is a regular thing that you can get. You can also add on the 30% off if that's something they're advertising. Just do as much as you can, and you can really get your ticket price down.
Because anytime somebody says that, and a part of it too, and this is not an episode on trains, so I do apologize, but the other thing is, and that you had just found when you were looking at it, sometimes leaving at 11 o'clock, you can only get the base ticket, which is $150 a person. But if you leave at 12 o'clock, all of a sudden it's you can get the young price, you can get the senior price, you can get the me and you, the traveling
really
together.
Good tip. Yes.
It's so for whatever reason, it's either some of them are already sold out or some of them are just simply not offered because it's a high travel time. So we're not going to offer discounts on those. So everyone wants to leave at 11, but no one wants to leave at 12. It's a little bit, if you're an early riser, sometimes in the morning, it's a little bit more expensive. Not the 6 a.m., tons of offers. The 8 a.m., nothing, because that's a lot of times people will take that for work to go.
Yeah, there's rush hour pricing, essentially. Yeah. It's we're not giving you guys any deals during rush hour.
So that's just something to keep in mind if you are going to be booking a train anywhere, that it can be a huge savings if you are booking trains and if you find a discount code. And some of them are, unfortunately, like the one we just used was expired, I think yesterday, January 13th, but you had to book the train had to be booked for, I think it was January 29th to April 2nd or something like that. So it's one of those things is you can't use the discount code for a trip you're going to book that day. You have to use it for a trip you're going to book in the future. But it can be a huge savings, as we have found. It was, we saved $70 on train
We're going
tickets.
to be real fancy in business class.
Absolutely. That's free snacks.
Darcy's going to have a free glass of Prosecco.
At least one. She might have Nathaniel's. That's 2 free glasses of Prosecco for Darcy. So I think that's everything on cruises. I hope that it answered some of your questions if you were kind of wondering just idly if you should be on a cruise in Italy, if you should take a cruise to Italy, if you should take a cruise around Italy. Mm-hmm. The resounding answer is no. Okay, I have no idea. I'm hoping you drew your own conclusions.
I feel like the thing is, if you like cruises, go for it. Take a big cruise.
Yes, 100%.
I don't know how ecological they are. I know we were talking about that. Taking a ferry is a more ecological choice potentially.
To a flight.
To a flight, yes.
Yeah.
If you have time and you want to take a quirky option, I would say go for a ferry. They seem interesting. But again, if you have time, that's a good option. If you just want to be on the water in Italy, you can rent a little boat for the day.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you can rent one if you know how to pilot a boat. You probably have to prove that you have a license, but you can certainly take an excursion with a captain and their boat.
Yeah. And that'll give you the same sort of, Pirates of the Caribbean, salty air, feeling like a old sea dog.
Yep.
So I think that's everything. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. We appreciate it. We hope it was not too off topic. We got into public libraries there for a good minute.
We did. I forgot about the public libraries. Yep. That was a fun tangent.
So we hope it was at least somewhat answering your questions. Yeah. And we hope you will tune in to our next episode yet to be decided.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have any suggestions for episodes, if you want to hear anything specific, if you have questions about your trip and want to ask us for our opinions, feel free to do that. You can reach out on Instagram and at our email at onlyabagpodcast.
Absolutely. And onlybag.com if you'd like to look at some articles.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all so much for listening. We appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. Tanti abbracci.
Love that.
Thank you. I'm working on it.
I love it. And goodbye.
Goodbye.
Yeah, we need it to be softer.
Ciao.